Ex-wife cheated with her ex and she begs to fix it after my stepdaughter helped to take them both down. Background: in 2006 I was 25 and married a woman 13 years older than me and became a stepdad to a 15-year-old girl. I always considered myself a level-headed person, kept my cool, and went with the flow. That was until my marriage fell apart. Cast: me, Alma, former wife, Marina, stepdaughter, Carl, stepdaughter's biological father, Karen, BF's ex-wife. So it's the summer of 2009. Alma and I have 3 years in and Marina just graduated high school. Alma tells me that Marina has been asking about her biological father. Alma says that she wants to write to an old address she had for him and see if he would be interested in getting to know his daughter. I was fine with it as I believe that Marina had every right to try and get to know her father. A month goes by and Alma tells me that Carl emailed her and is open to getting to know his daughter. Alma and Carl email back and forth, so she can feel him out and he can get a sense of what Marina is like. At this point I don't mind at all because Alma is open about all the emailing and what they write about. Fast forward a few weeks, Marina and Carl are communicating back and forth regularly, everything looks to be working out. I start to notice Alma on the computer more and more chatting with Carl. I ask her about it, and she affirms that she and he developed a friendship over the past few weeks. I don't think much about it as she isn't hiding anything and Carl lives in Mexico City, we lived in Central CA. A few months go by and Alma tells me that Marina wants to meet Carl, and he has time off coming so it's a perfect time to do it. Alma will go with Marina, but I wouldn't be able to go since I couldn't get the time off of work. Alma and Marina go on their trip, they are gone for 2 weeks. Week 1 is spent at Alma's grandparents' home and week 2 would be spent in Cabo where Carl would fly in to give him and Marina time to connect in person. Their vacation came and went and they finally came home. When I picked up the girls I began asking about the trip, but all I would get would be one-word answers from both of them. Marina and Alma looked like they were upset with one another. I figured they got into an argument on the way home. A few hours in a plane can do that to you. A week later and we are back in our routine, but Alma and Marina are still barely talking. I ask what is wrong and she tells me that her and Marina had an argument about Carl. I chalked it up to the meeting not being longer, so I say well maybe next vacation Carl can spend in California, and he can bring his son so Marina can meet her brothers, they can even stay with us a few days. Alma really liked that idea. So and I kid you not, the very next day both are at work and I have the day off. I am working around the house and come across a small stack of papers on the entryway table. I pick them up and see if they are important. It's a printed out email and I see my name in it. I read it and just keep reading through the stack of papers. It was a complete printout of Alma and Carl's email conversations they were having through her work email address. I felt sick, the more I read the sticker I felt. In the emails they had the whole vacation planned out including the fact that Carl would be staying with her and Marina in the suite I had arranged for them rather than get his own hotel room. The worst was the fact that they were debating how they should tell Marina that they planned on being affectionate with each other during this trip because as he put it she should be happy that her parents are finding each other again after 18 years and how else are you and I going to be able to share a room? Turns out Marina wasn't very happy about the situation and wouldn't let them be alone together. First thing I did was take the emails and have copies made. I wasn't sure on what I was going to do yet, but I knew I should make them. I then drove to Alma's work and told her I was there to take her to lunch. When we got to a secluded parking lot I confronted her about the emails. She had the nerve to try and turn it on me. How could you go through my private emails like that? She didn't argue, she just claimed that the bond that she and Carl had was strong, and that I wasn't the husband that she had hoped I would be. I argued, I cried and I asked her if we could work through it and all she would say is maybe, and that she would think about it. For the next few days I was a mess. I would mope and pout when I was alone, and would be Alma's attentive husband when she was home. Then I saw that she and Carl were chatting on the home computer not even trying to hide it. The revenge. When I realized that this wasn't going to end I decided that I needed ammunition. I already had the emails from her work, but I wanted more, so I found a computer program that runs in the background, takes screenshots, and is a keystroke logger. I installed it on both our home computers. With the program I had screenshots of their chatting sessions, and I had access to Alma's personnel email accounts. I found every last bit of correspondence and printed it out. At first I thought I would take the emails to a lawyer that could use it for my divorce, but then I found out that California was a no-fault state, so it wouldn't matter, so I came up with Plan B. I took everything I had collected and began going through it. I arranged it in chronological order and began writing down every bit of information that it thought I could use. Every break at work I would just read, highlight and write down information. I ended up with 2 notebooks full of random info. Where Carl worked, where his father's home was, phrases Carl would use. Phase 2 was the fun part. I went to a popular search engine that also would provide you with a free email address. I found the link to the Mexican version and created an email address for a fake woman. Let's call her Miss Sandoval. Miss Sandoval emails Alma and tells her that she was Carl's live-in girlfriend until a few weeks prior, and that she had been debating whether or not to email and warn her about Carl and his anger. Miss Sandoval wrote about their relationship and things that they would do, like his favorite vacation spots, how she cared for his boys, and all the pet names he would call her. Everything written would come from one of the emails or chats they would have. Then Miss Sandoval wrote about how he would become verbally abusive, and how it started around the same time that Alma and Carl's relationship changed. Emails went back and forth for a week, and in one email, I included pictures of a battered woman I found online. As this interaction is going on, I am still keeping tabs on their conversations, and their tones have changed. Alma asks about Miss Sandoval, and of course he denies knowing who she is, and of course Alma doesn't believe him. She is furious that he would lie to her, and that now she feels like she is the reason for this poor woman's mistreat. In the end, Alma breaks things off with him, and she even shares the email from Miss Sandoval with Marina, and convinces her that her father is a terrible person, and she shouldn't have any more contact with him. Oh, but that's not all. During my spying I was able to find Carl's ex-wife's, Karen, social media, and had Miss Sandoval email her a copy of every email I had. Now, I don't know what Mexico's divorce laws are like, but Karen was very grateful for all the info, and was sure that it would help her in the divorce that had been going on for 3 years at that point. Now let's not forget about Alma. She didn't go unscathed from this. When her relationship with Carl tanked, she naturally tried to fix things with me, and I was so satisfied that I torpedoed their relationship. I was more than happy to accept her attention. Don't get me wrong, our marriage was over. I was just leading her to think that we were working things out. On the day that I left, the first eviction notice arrived from the bank. Apparently the ordeal made me forget to pay the mortgage on our house, and her job received an email from me with copies of her and Carl's inappropriate emails made using the company email address and showing it was on company time. It was worth the hit to my credit score just to get her frantic voice messages about her losing the house and her getting demoted at work. Update. So, to answer some of the common questions I've gotten. Marina and I still talk and visit on occasion, but she has her own family and I moved away due to work. Marina and her biological father tried to connect again a few years later, but in the end he cut all ties with her because she wouldn't act like a loving and devoted daughter on the first visit. Alma and Marina never found out that I was the one to email her as Miss Sandoval. I need to clarify that I intentionally forgot to pay the home mortgage for a few months. She had no idea since I was the one who set up the online accounts and I picked up all the mail. Wife got mad I served her after she had a nightstand and wanted me to raise a fair baby. My wife and I met in 2008 when we were both traveling. We met in Madrid, and it was a very stereotypical meet cute. Our eyes met from across the bar, and I approached her. We ended up going home together that night. We spent the next 3 days having sex and drinking and soaking up the sun, and decided to keep in touch. She went home, and I finished my travels, and we began a year-long LDR before I moved to be with her. Over the course of the LDR, she divulged to me that she had cheated on a previous boyfriend and felt bad about it, but felt his choice to dump her was over the top, and that cheating wasn't always a silver bullet, especially since it was only a kiss. I realize now that she was sizing up my reaction and almost certainly cheating. This I can actually forgive and let go because duck LDRs, and it's in the distant past, but not what happened last week. I told her at the time it was a deal breaker, and if I caught her so much as flirting with another man I would dump her. There are two absolute no-nos in a relationship: no violence and no cheating. A year after I moved, we got married, and a year later again she fell pregnant. I was overjoyed. She seemed distant and sad and anxious the first 2 months after finding out, and eventually, after I poked and prodded, she broke down and told me she had a one-night stand around the time of conception and the kid might not be mine. I was on a plane back home 2 days later and didn't speak to her for a month. I ignored all her messages and calls, but eventually I caved and we talked. She said she was going to get an in utero paternity test, and if the baby wasn't mine she would terminate, but that she wanted me to come back first. I went back and she got the test. I was in the room when she got the results. Not mine. I told her she was scheduling the appointment that day, or I was going to a divorce lawyer as soon as I left the hospital. She scheduled the appointment for a week later. The day of the appointment I drove her and held her hand, as in termination, under any circumstances, is a traumatic event for a woman. In the car she broke down in tears and begged me to wait, change my mind, try to make it work, anything but go through with it, and I looked her dead in the eye and told her, "Do whatever you want, it's your body and your life, but I will not raise another man's child. That child will be the living embodiment of your betrayal, and a daily reminder of what you did. I will not subject myself to that." Termination or divorce? Edit for detail. I wanted a divorce. As soon as she hesitated, I jumped right to divorce. I never tried to talk her into it. I advised against the termination. She didn't want to keep the kid and lose the marriage, she wanted both. She told me directly that she would terminate if I left her regardless. She even told me before I flew back that even if the baby was mine and I divorced her, she would be getting in termination. She wanted specifically to keep the child and have me raise it with her, and unless I stayed, she was getting the termination no matter what. That was not happening. She asked me if she had it, if I would give her another chance. I said yes. I loved my wife. Ducking sue me. I am not sorry, I refused to play daddy to her infidelity spawn. She got the termination. There were complications and she was on bed rest for a month. For a while after, she was short with me. Unaffectionate and cold. We lost the spark. I tried, but she didn't. She told me one night after a few drinks that she resented me for making her choose. I told her I was glad she got the termination as she deserved to suffer for what she'd done. I regretted saying this out loud immediately, even though that is exactly how I felt and still feel. One day I came home early from work and found her crying on the couch with a man next to her holding her. A man I'd met many times before. A man she worked with. The look on their faces told me everything I needed to know. He was the father. It wasn't a one-night stand. After I dragged him out of the house by his neck, she admitted they'd had a 3-month affair. I will never know if this is the extent of the truth. To this day I accept that and have stopped asking. I began divorce proceedings and immediately kicked her out of the house. She begged and cried and pleaded for months, and again, stupidly, I broke and took her back. I told her she had to quit her job and cut contact. She agreed and made the call there and then. We moved away from her city and bought a house of mine in the other end of the country. We went to marriage counseling and got better. Slowly but surely we went from strength to strength. We now both had total transparency on all accounts and accepted that's the way it was. As time went on, I stopped looking at her phone. Things were great between us. Our sex life was great, we're both travel junkies and went on lots of trips, and started talking about having kids. We tried for 2 years to conceive a child, and it hadn't happened yet, but the practice was a lot of fun, so what the hell. This was the case for years. I was completely unguarded and my defenses were down when the most recent event happened. She had gotten slightly distant for a couple of months, but not so much that I was worried. I asked her about it and she always made a point of being affectionate when I did and assuring me it was all good, but her default, when not being prompted, was to be quiet and seek out her own space. She was out drinking with her friends one night and I stayed at home. I woke up at 4 a.m. and heard her voice downstairs. I went out and asked if that was her, no answer, she didn't hear me. I guessed pretty quickly that she was on the phone, and due to the time it was, her recent withdrawal, and her dubious relationship with loyalty, I decided to listen in. She was laughing and flirting, and saying crap like "I miss you too" and "I love you too." I knew it was him, I was certain of it. Then she started talking about how good the room service was, and when she could see him again, and I had heard enough. I charged down the stairs like a bull, and she knew she had been caught. She started yelling and screaming and cursing me, shouting that she'd been to a doctor here, and she'd told her during the termination there was some sort of a problem. She was drunk and slurring her words and crying, but somewhere in the minutiae of words like tear and scar tissue and permanent, I got it out of her that her uterus had been damaged, and it was unlikely she could ever bring a baby to term. She'd found this out 3 months prior, right around when she started getting distant again. I grabbed the phone out of her hand. She tried to take it back. We clawed back and forth until I shoved her back on the couch and told her not to get back up until I told her to. I sat on the chair opposite her and went through every detail. A half-dozen text messages from him asking when she was going to be leaving the bar, and that he missed her voice, and how much fun they'd had. Obviously all the other messages had been deleted, but she hadn't had a chance to delete the ones from that night yet. I read the messages aloud and she stared at me with daggers in her eyes. I asked her over and over to explain herself, and eventually she jumped up and started screaming again. She screamed that she'd taken a day off work and dove to meet him halfway, and they ducked in a hotel all day. She screamed that when she got the news from the doctor she saw me as an enemy, and he was her ally. She screamed at me that she wasn't sorry, and that I'd ruined her life. I yelled back that I was glad she got the termination, and if I could destroy him, and take that away from her too I would. She slapped me across the face. And I slapped her back. It was open-handed, but proportionately much harder than she slapped me. She fell back onto the couch, and looked at me stunned and in disbelief as she held her face and began to sob. She reached for her phone and I snatched it away from her, before throwing it and smashing it against the wall. I went up to my room and paced back and forth, and she sat downstairs crying, and that's where we stayed until morning. When I went downstairs she was asleep. I woke her up and told her to get a shower and get out. That I'd already made an appointment with my lawyer to file for divorce, and she wasn't staying in the house while I was gone. She sobbed and begged me not to go through with it. She said she was drunk and didn't mean it. Said she only made up the story about needing him to hurt me, and that I was her one and only and blah blah blah. She said she was sorry she slapped me and didn't want an apology for me slapping her back, that she deserved it. I agreed she deserved it and told her it was good she wasn't waiting for an apology, because she would be getting one. That was last week. This week she's back living with her parents. She calls me every day. 10 times a day. She sends lengthy, weepy text messages that I don't read or reply to, as my lawyer says I shouldn't contact her unless through him. I'm going forward with the divorce. FML. Edit, an important note I left out, that I have answered on numerous comments, and it wasn't until someone pointed out I should have mentioned it in the OP. She stated she had no interest in raising the baby alone. If I divorced her she was going through with it. She didn't want to keep the baby, and I made her get rid of it. She wanted us both to keep it and be the father to the child of the man she cheated with. At this point I still believe the pregnancy was due to a one-night stand she had a weekend away with the girls. She was not on a weekend with the girls.